Hey guys, tonight we are letting the rain do the heavy lifting. Picture its steady drops tapping against the window, the kind of rhythm that makes your eyelids feel like they've been secretly weighted with tiny sandbags. You're not outside, drenched and miserable, though you're safe, tucked in, listening. But here's the cheeky reality check. If you ever tried actually living in this kind of fairy tale weather, muddy boots, dripping cloaks, horse stables that smell like, well, horses, you probably wouldn't survive this with your sanity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where people are listening from. It feels like this huge, sleepy campfire circle spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rain outside doesn't just fall, it presses itself against the glass in long streaks, like it's trying to get inside and join you. You can almost smell the damp earth rising from the cobblestones of a little French village centuries ago. This is the place where beauty lives. No, not some airbrushed Disney princess, just a thoughtful, quietly stubborn young woman, the kind who prefers books to gossip and can find charm in cracked teacups. You walk beside her, hearing the clop of cartwheels in puddles, vendors arguing over the price of onions, and the occasional sneeze of a donkey who clearly regrets all its life choices. History, fact. Villages like this in 17th or 18th century France warranty so much quaint postcard material, as they were mud-slick networks of timber-framed houses. Most people worked from dawn to dusk, lived with extended family in one smoky room, and considered the occasional roast chicken a festival. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some folks back then believed rain itself had healing powers. Yes, you could literally collect stormwater in jars and sell it as medicine. Historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or just entrepreneurial nonsense. But hey, people will sell anything if you slap miracle cure on it. You trail after beauty as she balances between family duties and her own inner world. Her father, a merchant, once had wealth, but, like a lot of men in history who tried risky ventures, he lost almost everything. One storm, one sunk ship, and suddenly your imported silks are just soggy bundles feeding fish. You feel the weight of that failure pressing in, not just on him, but on everyone who depends on him. Beauty doesn't complain. She adjusts. She fetches water. She mends clothes. She reads aloud from books so battered they look like they've been gnawed by particularly literary goats. The rain keeps pouring, and you notice how the sound shifts depending on what it strikes sharp against roof tiles. Muffled in hay, metallic when it pings off the old iron bell of the village chapel. You follow her home, a modest cottage where her sisters gossip about jewels they'll never own and complain about chores they'll never finish. Beauty, of course, just shrugs. She's used to the imbalance. And here's a thought to keep you cozy. As you listen, you might imagine the rain outside your own window blending with that rain in Beauty's world, centuries apart, yet somehow linked by the same watery music. Think of it as time travel through sound. You don't need a portal or a spell, just ears and imagination. Pretty low maintenance, really. There's a knock on the cottage door, her father, dripping, clutching the news that will set the entire story in motion. You can almost smell the wet wool of his coat as he shakes it off. He's heard that one of his ships might have survived, limping into harbor with at least some goods intact. Hope, fragile and glittering, drops into the room like a coin into a well. Everyone cheers, everyone but Beauty, who stays quiet, almost as though she knows the rain outside is foreshadowing something much darker. You pull your blanket tighter. The fire crackles, and in the rhythm of the rain, you hear the very first stirrings of a story that has lasted for centuries, not because of the glitter, but because of the quiet, stubborn heart at its center. Instead of heavy drumming on the roof, it trickles in a light mist, the kind that clings to your eyelashes and makes you question whether you re-wet or just imagining it. You follow Beauty's father as he sets out on the muddy road toward the harbor, hopeful that his fortunes might shift like the clouds. Villages in those centuries often relied on these occasional market trips as lifelines. A single shipment of cloth or spices could mean the difference between a year of debt and a year of small celebrations. Imagine waiting half a year for your package, only to learn it's now feeding barnacles at the bottom of the Atlantic. That was the stakes Beauty's father lived with. The salty wind mixes with the damp air, and you can almost taste the brine on your lips. But his hope collapses when he learns the truth. His last ship didn't arrive full of riches. The rain, in its endless persistence, seems to mock him, dripping down his face like tears he doesn't want to shed in public. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. Sailors back then sometimes swore by storm charms, little knotted ropes, bits of wax, or even verses carved on scraps of wood. Historians still argue whether captains actually believed in them or just carried them as cheap insurance against terrified crews staging mutinies. Either way, the sea kept eating ships, charms or no charms. On the road home, your boots get heavier, not from mud, but from the weight of what awaits. Children to disappoint, debts to confess. But on the path, something unusual happens. A storm rises suddenly, darker than anything you've seen yet, forcing him to seek shelter. You can imagine the branches overhead dripping fat drops onto his shoulders, the air thick with the smell of wet bark and moss. He stumbles deeper into the forest, and here, like some uncanny painting, the rain stops. But because the trees form such a dense canopy that only the occasional bead slips through, the silence is almost worse than the storm. His heart pounds louder than the patter he'd grown used to. He walks on, and what emerges before him feels wrong in all the right ways. A towering gate of iron, twisted yet elegant, opening onto a path that leads to a mansion. No, this is the kind of mansion that looks like it was designed by an architect who was both brilliant and just a little unhinged. Turrets loom like watchful eyes, vines crawl up the stone like green fingers, and windows glimmer faintly, even though the rain-dark sky shouldn't allow much light. And fun twist people back then believed houses could hold moods of their owners. Historians still argue whether that was superstition or just an early attempt at architecture criticism. Beauty's father steps cautiously inside the gates. No guard dogs bark, no servants rush out. The silence presses in thick as velvet. He walks toward the mansion, and every crunch of gravel under his boots feels magnified in the quiet. Inside, the air is warmer, scented faintly with roses, though not fresh ones. These smell too sweet, too heavy, like perfume left open too long. And then he sees it, a garden glowing faintly in the dimness, roses blooming despite the season. He remembers his daughter's one request. While her sisters demanded jewels and gowns, Beauty asked only for a rose. He reaches out, fingertips brushing velvet petals, and then the silence cracks. A growlo, deep, primal, vibrates through the air. He freezes. From the shadows, a figure steps forward, massive and shrouded eyes, burning like embers under storm clouds. The beast. The rain might have stopped outside, but inside this place, a storm is just beginning. The beast's presence hits like thunder, without lightning, sudden rumbling, and impossible to ignore. Beauty's father stumbles back, the rose still clutched in his trembling hand, petals brushing his knuckles like fragile evidence of his trespass. You hear the breath of the beast, heavy and deliberate, each exhale carrying a heat that fogs the cool air between them. His voice follows, low and jagged, like stone grinding against stone. You steal from me. Now pause with that. You, sitting cozy in your bed with your fan humming or your headphones on, UD probably set a personal record for the 100-meter dash if you were in this man's boots. But Beauty's father, pinned by the beast's stare, finds that his legs feel less like legs and more like water. The beast towers fur, damp with dew from the garden, claws catching stray light, horns curling like an artist decided to merge bull and wolf and sprinkle in nightmare for flair. His clothes, though old-fashioned, are finely cut, a hint of nobility stitched into the seams. This isn't a mindless monster. This is someone who once sat at a table where etiquette mattered, who once held a fork before he ever brandished claws. Here's your historical anchor. Across Europe, nobles often displayed their lineage and power through elaborate portraits, castles, and courtly manners. But the myth of the fallen noble, one cursed or exiled, was common to people. Whispered of lords turned into beasts for cruelty or into shadows for greed. Historians still argue whether these tales were just metaphors for failed dynasties or genuine fears that sin left a mark not just on souls but on flesh. Beauty's father drops to his knees, babbling apologies, words tripping over themselves like frightened mice. He meant no harm. He only wanted a single rose for his youngest daughter. She asked for nothing else. He didn't realize it belonged to anyone. The rain outside returns faintly, drumming against the windows, punctuating his every plea. You come into my home, you pluck what is mine, and you think words are enough. His voice makes the glass panes quiver, and yet, in that moment, there's no killing blow. Instead, the beast proposes a bargain. His anger softens into something darker, more calculating. The man may live, but only if he agrees to send one of his daughters in his place. It's a cruel twist, but also a curious one. Why a daughter? Why not the man himself, condemned to servitude, or worse? Quirky tidbit here. In medieval law codes, ransom exchanges often involved family members, and daughters were sometimes used as political hostages in marriage deals. Beauty's father nods desperately, the rose still in hand, like both curse and salvation. The beast lets him go, but not before leaning close enough that the man feels the heat of his breath against his skin, close enough that he sees the sorrow tucked behind the fury in those ember eyes. Then, with a gesture sharper than a guillotine, the beast sends him away. You imagine him stumbling out of the mansion, the gates creaking open as if by unseen hands. The rain returns in force the moment he crosses the threshold, as though the sky itself has been waiting. Each drop stings his face, and every step toward home feels heavier. He clutches the rose carefully, terrified it might wilt, terrified it might betray him if he lets it go. On the road back, the forest seems darker than before. Branches like skeletal arms, shadows stretched long and sharp. He hurries, though every direction feels the same under the endless drizzle. By the time he reaches his house, his coat is soaked through, his hair plastered flat, his boots carrying half the road's mud. He enters not as a victorious merchant, but as a man who has signed away more than he can bear. His daughters rush to meet him. The older ones eye his empty hands, disappointment sharp as vinegar. But Beauty notices the rose. She takes it gently, fingers brushing the petals, and she smiles, a soft, grateful smile, unaware of the price attached. Her father collapses into a chair, the fire sputtering weakly in the hearth, and tells them everything. Now, hear S, where the scholarly debate slides in. Some versions of the tale emphasize the father's cowardice, while others paint him as a tragic victim of circumstance. Historians still argue whether the moral was to highlight parental failure or to show the weight of choices when survival demanded bargains. Either way, his confession hangs heavy in the smoky air, blaming her request for the curse now hanging over them. Beauty, however, sits quiet, tracing the rose's velvet edge, and then speaks in a tone both gentle and unshakable. She will go. She will honor the bargain. And in that instant, thunder rolls outside, as if the sky itself approves, warns. You can almost feel the chill seeping in through the window frame, the rain tapping insistently against the glass-like fingers, reminding you that the night is far from over. Beauty has chosen, and the storm has only just begun. You rise early the next morning, even though the rain never really stopped. It lingers, soft and steady, dripping from the eaves and sinking into the soil, making the path outside shimmer like wet glass. Beauty, too, rises before her sisters. The house is dim, shadows stretching long across the wooden floorboards, the fire barely alive. Her father sits slumped in his chair, staring at the dying embers, as if they might change the bargain struck the night before. Beauty moves quietly, her footsteps light, her hands carrying the rose, now placed in a small glass jar. The petals look almost too perfect, like silk instead of something alive. She sets it down near the window, where the gray light touches it. Then, without hesitation, she begins to prepare herself. You watch her gather what little she owns: a shawl, patched but clean, a book with worn pages, a locket containing a tiny sketch of her mother. The sisters protest loudly, some crying, some sneering, some insisting she's trying to steal attention again. But Beauty only smiles faintly. "I promised," she says, and there's no bitterness in it. Historically, daughters leaving their families to enter unknown households wasn't just the stuff of fairy tales. Across Europe, young women were often sent to convents, arranged marriages, or distant estates, usually with little choice in the matter. Historians still argue whether this was framed as duty or sacrifice, perhaps both. Beauty's quiet acceptance echoes these traditions, a nod to the idea that women bore the weight of family bargains in silence. Her father begs her to reconsider. His voice breaks, his hands tremble as he reaches for her, but she takes them gently, presses them back into his lap, and assures him she is not afraid. A small joke slips into your mind. Here you know she's braver than most of us. Because if someone told you your roommate had claws, horns, and a bad temper, you'd probably pack your bags for anywhere else. By mid-morning, the rain softens to a drizzle, and the forest path calls again. Her father prepares the old horse, the leather reins slick with damp. Beauty mounts gracefully, her shawl wrapped tight, the locket cold against her skin. The family watches from the doorway, sisters clutching their skirts, eyes a mix of jealousy and relief, and the father slumped with grief so heavy it seems to bend his shoulders forward. The journey back to the beast's estate feels different now. The trees loom closer, their branches dripping with beads of water that plop onto the ground with an oddly steady rhythm. The road twists and dips, mud clinging to the horses' hooves, yet there's also a kind of calm in the repetition of rain, a lull that almost feels protective, like the sky is guiding her. Beauty studies the forest as she rides. She notices details her father was too frightened to see, the moss glowing faintly green in the mist, the clusters of mushrooms sprouting like tiny umbrellas, the way the fog curls around tree trunks like the folds of a sleeping blanket. Even in a place meant to frighten, she finds pieces of wonder. This brings us to a quirky tidbit. In folklore studies, forests often serve as both danger and sanctuary liminal spaces where transformation occurs. Historians still argue whether the beast's forest was meant to symbolize wildness outside society's control, or an inner wilderness where characters confront themselves. Either way, Beauty doesn't shy from it. She leans in. By late afternoon, the mansion appears, rising from the mist as though the forest itself is giving birth to stone. The gates creak open without touch, a detail that makes you shiver, even though you know it's probably enchanted convenience. The courtyard glistens with rainwater, each cobblestone reflecting gray light. Beauty dismounts, strokes the horse's damp mane, and whispers her thanks before stepping forward. Inside, the mansion breathes differently than it did for her father. Candles spring to life in hallways, fires stir in hearths, and velvet curtains sway, though no hand touches them. It's as if the house itself recognizes her presence. She follows the warmth and light until she finds herself standing in the grand dining hall. The beast enters, his footsteps echoing against marble floors. He is every bit as imposing as her father, described towering, fur bristling, horns curling like carved ivory. And yet, when his eyes meet hers, something changes. He does not roar. He does not threaten. He simply regards her, a flicker of surprise, cutting through the mask of ferocity. "You came willingly," he rumbles. His voice shakes the air, but the tone carries more wonder than anger. Beauty inclines her head, her shawl slipping slightly as she replies, "I promised." That single word softens the edges of the room. The beast, awkward in his size and strength, gestures toward the table. A feast spreads itself across polished wood-silver platters, gleaming, fruits piled high, roasted meats steaming. Beauty sits, though she eats little, her appetite dampened by nerves. The beast watches carefully, as though uncertain whether to speak, as though each moment balances between threat and possibility. In that pause, you catch a historical reflection. The ritual of shared meals has long been used as a way to establish trust. Medieval lords would invite rivals to their table as both hospitality and subtle power play. Historians still argue whether Beauty's willingness to dine with the beast reflects genuine trust or survival instinct dressed up as manners. The rain outside continues, steady and constant, like background music. It fills the silences between them. It softens the beast's jagged movements. It soothes Beauty's fears, even if only slightly. And when at last the beast speaks again, it is with a strange gentleness. "Do not be afraid. You are mistress. Here now, mistress." a word that lands heavier than expected. Beauty studies him, her fingers resting lightly on the rose pinned to her shawl, and realizes this bargain has shifted. She is not simply a prisoner. She has been invited awkwardly, fiercely, into a place where roles are not yet written. And so, in the flicker of candlelight, with rain threading the silence, the story of Beauty and the Beast truly begins. That first night in the mansion, you sense the weight of both silence and rain. Beauty is shown to a chamber more elaborate than anything she's ever dreamed, of velvet curtains pooling onto the floor, a bed so wide she feels small upon it, and a mirror framed in carved wood that seems to ripple faintly as if it remembers other faces. Candles glow in corners, but their flames do not waver, as though some invisible hand shields them from drafts. You'd think she'd collapse immediately, exhausted by fear and travel. But you know how sleep works. The more you need it, the less it comes. Beauty lies awake, listening to the rain pattering on stone ledges, the steady hum of water in gutters. She turns over the locket in her hands, thumb brushing the tiny sketch of her mother, wondering if the woman could ever have imagined this fate for her daughter. The Beast does not appear again that night. Instead, the mansion itself seems to keep her company. The fire hisses when she shivers, warming just enough. The drapes close themselves when the moonlight feels too sharp. A pitcher of water pours itself into a goblet with a faint clink. It's both comforting and unsettling, like staying in a hotel where the staff never shows their faces, yet everything runs perfectly on time. Here's your mainstream fact to anchor you. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European tales often gave enchanted houses their own personalities. They weren't just backdrops. They functioned almost like characters. Historians still argue whether this reflected people's awe of new mechanical inventions, clocks, automata, self-opening gadgets, or whether it was simply a narrative way to show that a curse touched everything, even bricks and mortar. Beauty finally drifts off, lulled by the rhythm of rain and the faint creak of the beams overhead. And in her dreams, she sees roses, endless rows of them, each petal heavy with dew, each stem sharp with thorns. She wanders through them, the path narrowing until the blossoms form walls, closing her in. Just as panic stirs, a shadow moves through the Rosissa shape, too large, too shaggy, too familiar. She wakes with a gasp, the sound swallowed immediately by the muffled storm outside. The following days blur into a rhythm that is both strange and soothing. Each morning she wakes to find new gowns, folded neatly by the wardrobe silks in soft colors, lace stitched so delicately it could catch a breath. She wears them, though she feels like a child playing dress-up. Each noon she dines at the long table, the Beast seated across from her. He eats little, his movements deliberate, as if each bite is a test of patience. And each evening, when shadows stretch and the rain begins again, they walk together in the garden. That garden, you notice, becomes the hinge of their relationship. Beauty marvels at roses that bloom despite constant dampness, blossoms that glow faintly in twilight. She bends to smell them, and the Beast watches, not with hunger, but with a kind of yearning he seems embarrassed to feel. He asks about her family, her sisters, her childhood. She answers cautiously at first, then more freely, describing the chatter of the marketplace, the smell of bread baking, the simple joy of weaving garlands as a child. Quirky tidbit for you. In early French versions of the tale, Beauty was obsessed with books and knowledge, while later retellings leaned into her love for gardens and domestic tasks. Historians still argue which trait reflects her true character, but either way, she embodies curiosity, a hunger for more than what's handed to her. The beast listens intently, his massive form bending toward her, his clawed hands sometimes twitching as though he longs to gesture more gracefully. He never interrupts, though his breathing grows heavier when she laughs, as if joy is something he hasn't heard in centuries. Every night, though, comes the same moment, as the rain thickens, as the air smells of wet earth and moss. The beast clears his throat, hesitates, and asks softly, "Will you marry me?" Every night, Beauty answers gently, "No," and every night, the beast bows his head and accepts the answer, though a sigh escapes him, rattling leaves on the branches nearby. You'd think this repetition would wear thin, but instead, it becomes a kind of lullaby. The predictability comforts her, like knowing when thunder will roll. It's the same time each evening, the same cadence, the same refusal, and the same quiet resignation. Sleep itself works like that, sometimes ritualized, repetitive, waiting for surrender. One evening, Beauty decides to lighten the mood. When the beast asks his nightly question, she smiles and replies, "Not tonight, but perhaps when roses stop blooming in the rain." For a moment, silence hangs, heavy and uncertain. Then the beast lets out a sound, somewhere between a huff and a laugh. It's rough, awkward, but it's a laugh nonetheless. And there it is, the first crack in his armor. The rain thickens, drumming on the garden leaves. Beauty pulls her shawl tighter, not from cold, but from the intensity of the moment. She looks at him, not just the fangs, the fur, the frightening silhouette, but at the way his shoulders slump when she says no, the way his eyes soften when she talks about her mother, the way he holds himself as though ashamed of every gesture. Here's another historical thread in courtly romances of the Middle Ages. Beasts often symbolized the untamed aspects of menangor, desire, violence, that needed to be tempered by love. Historians still argue whether Beauty and the Beast was originally moral instruction for young brides or a tale of hope for broken men. Either way, you can feel the pattern unfolding, her presence reshaping him, his patience reshaping her. That night, Beauty returns to her chamber and finds a fresh gown laid out, embroidered with roses along the hem. She runs her fingers over the stitching, marveling at the delicacy, and for the first time, she feels a pang not of fear, but of pity. The rain continues its song against the glass. The fire sighs in the hearth. Beauty lies down, pulls the covers up, and lets her eyes close. Somewhere in the distance, the beast paces, claws scraping faintly against stone, repeating to himself the words he longs to hear but may never be granted. The mornings in the mansion start slowly, almost as if the house itself needs time to remember how to wake. Rain drizzles persistently against the tall windows, threading rivulets across glass panes that catch the gray light in fractured patterns. Beauty rises before the beast, as always, letting her eyes adjust to the soft shadows in the corners of her room. The locket rests on her pillow, a comforting weight against her palm, a reminder that she carries a piece of home even here in this strange, damp castle. You can almost hear the mansion breathing alongside her. The hearth flickers softly. Floorboards groan under their own age, and water drips somewhere in the wall, creating a gentle, repetitive rhythm. There is a calm in routine, and Beauty discovers that the predictability of these mornings with the patter of rain as her metronome, offers a strange solace. She dresses quietly in the gown placed neatly by her wardrobe, the fabric still warm from the mansion's peculiar but effective heating system. The beast, meanwhile, is already moving through the hallways, large silhouette brushing door frames, eyes flickering over tapestries and suits of armor. When he notices her watching, he nods, a tiny, deliberate gesture that feels monumental in scale when measured against his massive frame. The walk to breakfast is silent, save for the rain. The courtyard glistens under puddles, and the garden reflects the subdued sky in puddles that look like tiny mirrors. Beauty notices a rosebush, petals heavy with water. She brushes them gently with her fingertips. "You grow well," she murmurs, as if the plant might understand, and perhaps it does. Considering the mansion seems alive, mainstream historical fact. European nobility often employed gardeners year-round, cultivating roses and other ornamental plants to demonstrate both wealth and taste. A single bush might cost a fortune if imported from abroad, and the care for it required precision, patience, and ritual. Historians still argue whether the enchanted garden in the tale reflects actual horticultural practices or merely amplifies the motif of beauty cultivated under discipline. Breakfast itself is a curious blend of indulgence and routine. Platters of bread, cheese, fruit, and warm pastries appear alongside steaming mugs of tea. The beast eats methodically, slicing bread with deliberate care, chewing slowly as if savoring each bite, not only for nourishment, but for the discipline of eating well. Beauty notices the fine points, how he wipes crumbs meticulously, how he refills his cup without spilling, the way his fur glistens faintly when the firelight strikes it just so. Quirky tidbit. In some early versions of the tale, the beast would insist on eating with silver utensils, a practice reflecting a fascination with cleanliness and civility in a creature otherwise considered wild. Historians still argue whether this dichotomy was meant to contrast inner nobility with outer monstrosity, or if it simply added visual drama for storytellers. As the rain continues its soft percussion outside, Beauty speaks sparingly at first. She asks about the castle, about the library, about the portraits lining the halls. Each question is met with careful, deliberate responses. The beast doesn't dominate the conversation. Instead, he corrects gently, elaborates when necessary, and listens with unexpected attentiveness. There's a rhythm emerging, subtle, almost hypnotic, as if the mansion, the rain, and their cautious dialogue are conspiring to lull tension from both of them. In the afternoon, she begins exploring the rooms more freely. Tapestries depicting hunts, dances, and formal ceremonies invite her curiosity. She touches the threads, feeling the raised embroidery against her fingers. A small fountain in a hallway murmurs quietly, water spilling into a carved basin. She leans closer, imagining the builders of the castle craftsmen, whose hands knew both precision and artistry, who might have once whispered prayers into stone corners. The beast watches her explorations with measured caution. At times, you notice a flicker of hesitation, like a man unsure how much freedom to grant someone he's long feared may betray him. There's tension in every glance, a delicate negotiation played without words. Beauty, in her quiet, methodical way, begins to see him differently. She observes the care he takes in maintaining the house, the precision of his movements, the way his eyes soften when he thinks no one is looking. There is intelligence, yes, and caution, but also moments of vulnerability that make the fur and horns seem less frightening, more human. Quirky aside, in some folktale variants, the beast is described as having tears visible even through fur, which can be a difficult detail to illustrate, but speaks to the possibility of emotional transparency beneath monstrous exteriors. Historians still argue whether this imagery was meant to teach empathy or simply embellish drama. By evening, the rain slows, trickling gently now, almost whispering against the windows. Beauty finds herself in the garden again, examining roses, brushing leaves, and inhaling the damp scent of earth and petals. The beast approaches quietly, keeping distance, and for the first time, they walk together without conversation, letting the sound of rain and soft footfalls be their shared language. The first moments of true, quiet companionship take hold, not rushed, not forced. Beauty feels her chest expand slightly, relief curling around her heart, and in the hush of that gentle rain, she begins to understand. This castle, this beast, this strange new life is shaping her in subtle ways, just as she shapes him. The rain, persistent yet soft, becomes a lullaby as night descends. Beauty lies in her chamber, later, listening to its rhythm, reflecting on the day. She feels the weight of fear lift fractionally, replaced by curiosity, wonder, and something akin to trust. And when she closes her eyes, the soft drumming of droplets forms the backdrop to dreams where roses bloom endlessly and shadows do not bite. The rain does not stop. It rarely does. In this place, shifts from sheets to mist, from a thunderous drumroll to the faintest sprinkling, but it is always present, as if the sky has permanently pledged loyalty to water. You pad through the hallways, your slippers tapping gently against the cold floor. The walls alive with the faint smell of damp stone and candle wax. And tonight, Beauty decides to explore the library in earnest. The doors are taller than any you've ever seen, carved with spirals and beasts whose eyes seem to follow you. When they open, you half expect a roar of thunder or a burst of organ music, but instead, you are met with silence. Not empty silence, though it is the hush of countless voices, the kind of silence that feels thick with words, waiting. Rows upon rows of books tower around you, each shelf stretching farther than your gaze can carry. Dust motes float in the lamplight, tiny golden specks dancing lazily like they're drunk on the sheer abundance of stories here. The beast lingers at the threshold, watching Beauty's eyes widen, and though he says nothing, you sense he is pleased. Mainstream historical fact. Libraries have long been symbols of power and wealth. In the late Middle Ages, for instance, owning a collection of even a few dozen books was a sign of great privilege, since every volume had to be painstakingly copied by hand. Historians still argue whether private libraries like this one in fairy tales are exaggerations or accurate. Depictions of noble households that hoarded texts for status as much as for learning. Beauty steps forward, fingertips grazing spines of leather-bound volumes. She pulls one, at random its cover creaks, like an old knee joint. The pages smell of ink and time. The title is in a language she doesn't recognize, but the illustrations, mythical beasts, star charts, maps that fold into each other like puzzles, transcend translation. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval manuscripts, scribes doodled jokes or little cartoons in the margins. There's even a surviving note from a monk complaining, "It is cold, and my hand is tired." You can almost imagine the beast's library holding a few volumes like that where-board scribes left a century-old doodle of a cat chasing a mouse across a sacred page. Beauty laughs softly when she discovers a book of proverbs with oddly modern humor. He who eats too fast bites his tongue. She glances at the beast, who tilts his head in curiosity. It's funny, she explains. His brow furrows, then softens, and his low voice rumbles. Humor is strange, but you enjoy it, and that is the first time he notices the sound of her laughter light. Unexpected, almost scandalous, in a place that has been too long wrapped in silence. You see something in him shift, something fragile, like a shutter opening to let in fresh air. Beauty lingers by the firelit alcove, settling into a velvet chair with one of the slimmer tones. The beast, careful not to break the chair beneath his massive frame, sits across from her, content to watch. Candlelight flickers against the gilt edges of the pages, and the sound of rain filters in through high, arched windows, like soft applause for the act of reading. A debate sparks. Beauty wonders aloud if the library is truly infinite. The beast explains that, by design, the shelves twist into hidden corridors and staircases, making the architecture nearly impossible to map. Historians still argue whether such fictional labyrinth libraries were inspired by real architectural feats like the Library of Alexandria, or if they were simply metaphors for the endlessness of knowledge. Either way, you feel your head spin at the thought of getting lost in so many words. At one point, Beauty discovers a globe, old and cracked, continents drawn in unfamiliar shapes. She spins it slowly, marveling at seas with names long forgotten. The beast watches, amused, then admits, the world has changed since that was made. Even I cannot recall all of its truths. The conversation turns quiet again, but it is not uncomfortable silence. It is the silence of two people, absorbing, of curiosity, spreading like roots underground. By late evening, rain hammers harder on the roof, and the thunder seems to roll directly over the castle. Beauty jumps at a particularly sharp crack, and the beast almost instinctively moves closer, his presence steady and grounding. For a moment, you sense that the library, the rain, the storm, and the warm glow of fire conspire to press them together, to test whether trust can sprout in shadows. Before retiring, Beauty replaces the books carefully, aligning them with respect. She whispers, half to herself, "There's more knowledge here than one life could hold." The beast responds softly, "Then perhaps you will have more than one life to read them." She looks up, startled by the strangeness of the phrase, but his eyes are turned toward the window, where lightning briefly illuminates the rain-slick glass. Later, lying in bed, she thinks of the beast's words, of infinite shelves, of laughter that caught even her by surprise. The rain continues its lullaby, and the library's secrets fold into her dreams, leaving her wandering corridors of books that stretch far beyond waking. The rain has softened into a steady curtain, fine droplets hissing against the stone like a whisper too shy to speak aloud. You follow Beauty as she slips from the castle corridors into the garden. Tonight, the doors swing open with less resistance, as if the hinges themselves have grown fond of her visits. A cool dampness greets you, air heavy with the mingled scents of wet earth and blooms that only reveal themselves after sunset. The garden is unlike any you have seen in daylight. Here, petals glow faintly, as if painted with moonlight, and vines curl upward as though reaching to embrace the sky. Beauty pauses at the threshold. Stunned, she whispers, "They bloom at night." Her words sound both reverent and a little incredulous. The beast, trailing behind with steps that barely disturb the gravel, nods, His deep voice is nearly a rumble. They sleep when the sun commands, but awaken when the world is quiet. Mainstream historical fact. Many Victorian gardens experimented with night-blooming jasmine and moonflowers, prized for their heady perfume that intensified after dusk. Cultivating such plants was fashionable, as elite households hosted moonlight walks where guests wandered through glowing blossoms. Historians still argue whether this trend was born of genuine love for nocturnal beauty or simply another performance of wealth. Beauty steps forward, brushing her fingers across a cluster of blossoms that release a fragrance so intoxicating it almost feels like wine for the lungs. You draw in the same sense-sweep, a little wild, tinged with damp stone. She smiles, despite herself. Quirky tidbit. Certain cultures once believed lettuce had soporific powers. Imagine a nobleman inviting his guests into a garden where moonflowers glowed and bowls of lettuce leaves sat politely on the table, offered as a kind of edible lullaby. The beast, however, offers beauty nothing so adorningly, the unspoken invitation to keep walking. As the path winds deeper, the garden transforms into a dreamscape. Lilies tilt open like lanterns. Vines shimmer with dew that mirrors the stars. A small fountain gurgles, its ripples bending the moon's reflection until it looks as though the sky itself is liquid. Beauty leans over to watch the distortion, laughter bubbling when her own face wavers like a ghost. The beast lingers close, but not too close, always watching her reaction more than the flowers themselves. His world has been static for so long that her wonder feels almost borrowed light. You notice him tilt his head when she leans to inhale the faint spice of a night orchid. Something in his posture softens. A moth flutters near Beauty's hair, drawn by the faint sheen of oil from her braid. She startles, batting it away, then laughs at her own reaction. The beast offers her a single white blossom, heavy with dew. His clawed hand holds it awkwardly, the gesture almost comical. She hesitates, then accepts. The exchange is quiet, tender, and slightly absurd-like, watching a thunderstorm hand over a teacup. Historians still argue whether gardens like these in fairy tales represent fertility, hidden knowledge, or simply the luxury of owning land and time. Yet, as you walk with Beauty and the Beast, it feels less like a symbol and more like a reprieve, a pocket of stillness carved out by petals and rain. As the hour deepens, a low fog creeps along the ground, wrapping the base of hedges in ghostly ribbons. Beauty pulls her shawl tighter, though the air isn't cold, it is simply too thick with mystery. The beast notices and quietly adjusts a lantern so the light falls more warmly around her. His claws fumble at the handle, but the intention matters more than grace. You follow them toward an arbor where vines form a tunnel. Within, clusters of pale blossoms glow like lanterns, illuminating their faces in a softness you hadn't seen indoors. Beauty sits on a stone bench, the beast standing nearby, unwilling to intrude, yet unwilling to leave. The rain patters gently against leaves overhead, a lullaby stitched into the night. Quirky moment. You recall that nutmeg was once used in warm milk as a supposed sleep aid. Imagine Beauty joking, though softly, that she needs none of that nonsense tonight, not with a garden like this. The beast does not understand the joke, but he smiles anyway, as though mirroring her joy. They remain in companionable silence, Beauty lost in the strangeness of flowers that dare to bloom only when no one is watching, and the beast rooted in his own quiet longing. You sense it, the faint thread of something forming between them, tentative but undeniable. It's as fragile as the dew that vanishes by morning, and just as precious. When at last they rise to return, the path glistens as if paved with liquid silver. The garden exhales its fragrance, heavy and sweet, clinging to their clothes and hair. As the castle doors closed behind them, you realize the garden has done what no potion or bargain could achieve. It has given them a moment of peace, unmarred by curses or fear. Later, in her chamber, Beauty will press the white blossom between the pages of a book, tucking away the memory of moonlight and perfume. And the Beast, alone in his room, will catch the faint scent of that same flower drifting on the air, and wonder if perhaps, for the first time, his world is changing. The rain resumes its endless rhythm, steady, soothing, like applause from the sky itself. The rain thickens against the windows, a hushed percussion that seeps into your bones as you follow Beauty into the quiet of her chamber. The garden's perfumes still cling faintly to her shawl, but tonight something heavier rests on her shoulders, dreams pressing at the edges of wakefulness, as if the castle itself insists on entering her sleep. She slips between the sheets, the candle on her bedside table guttering low, its flame bending with each draft that sneaks through the stone walls. You stretch out beside her, not physically, of course, but in the way a dreamer accompanies another dreamer. The rhythm of the rain is the first lullaby, yet her mind does not surrender. Beauty tosses once, then twice, as if her body resists the softness of rest. Victorian physicians once believed that sleeplessness indicated a nervous imbalance, recommending everything from cool sponge baths to timed meals. Historians still argue whether these remedies were helpful or merely soothing distractions. In Beauty's case, no doctor is at hand, only the stubborn castle walls and the echo of the Beast's voice in memory. At last, sleep folds around her, and you drift inside. The dreamscape unfurls like an unfamiliar landscape. Neither the garden nor her family's cottage, but a place stitched from longing. Fields stretch endlessly, dotted with wild roses. A river runs through, glittering like liquid glass. You notice a curious detail. The water flows uphill, defying sense. Dreams, after all, rarely consult physics. Beauty walks these fields barefoot, and the roses lean toward her as though hungry for her presence. But when she bends to touch one, the thorns twist, sharp and warning. You feel her flinch, even within sleep, an unease rippling outward. Quirky tidbit. In some folk traditions, roses were placed under pillows to encourage pleasant dreams, though more often they encouraged sneezing fits. Imagine Beauty sneezing herself awake at the most dramatic point. Luckily, this dream spares her that embarrassment. The river, climbing against gravity, calls her. She kneels at its edge, sees not her own face, but her father's, lined with fatigue and worry. His lips move, but no sound reaches. She cries out, "I am here." Yet the current sweeps his reflection away. A knot of longing tightens in her chest. The dream shifts, clouds rushing overhead like a film reel fast-forwarded. The castle rises in the distance, not the one she knows, but a warped shadow of its pyres, bent windows glowing like watchful eyes. She feels herself pulled toward it, each step heavy, as though the ground itself tries to hold her back. And then, there he is, the Beast, standing at the threshold, but smaller, somehow diminished. He does not speak, merely watches. His gaze is not frightening, it is fragile. Historians still argue whether dreams and old tales were meant as divine messages, psychological reflections, or just narrative flair. Here, Beauty's dream is all three: her guilt, her yearning, her confusion, folded into one surreal tapestry. You sense her torn between two worlds, the comfort of family and the unsettling kindness of the beast. The rain outside her window sinks with the dream's river, drops falling in perfect rhythm. Beauty kneels again, cupping the impossible water in her hands. For a heartbeat, she imagines she could drink and wake with clarity. But the water slips through her fingers, leaving only chill. She whispers, "What do you want of me?" Though the dream offers no answer. Quirky moment. If you ever tried those dream dictionaries that claim sneezing means fortune or climbing stairs means ambition, you'll know how inconsistent they are. By one logic, Beauty's uphill river means prosperity. By another, it's simply indigestion. The truth: dreams are stubbornly personal, and hers is no exception. The scene darkens. Petals fall from the roses in a sudden rush, carpeting the ground. Beauty feels a panic rising, though she cannot name why. The beast's shadow stretches longer, swallowing the flowers, reaching for her. And just when fear would seize her fully, she jolts awake, gasping in the dim light of early dawn. Her hand clutches the bedclothes. Her heart thunders as if she'd run a marathon through fields of thorns. Outside, the rain persists, indifferent to her revelations. She presses her palm to her chest, whispering into the emptiness. It was only a dream, yet she knows dreams cling, sticky as cobwebs, long after the morning arrives. She rises, moving toward the window. Droplets race one another down the glass. The garden lies quiet, washed in silver, every flower bowed under the weight of water. Beauty exhales, slow, uncertain. She wonders if sleep reveals truths or only teases her with illusions. For now, she chooses not to decide. She steps away from the window, folds the dream back into herself like a letter never sent, and prepares to face another day in the castle. The rain, loyal as ever, keeps her secret. The rain does not quit, though by now you hardly expect it to. It has become a companion, a voice that hums steadily as you follow Beauty through the castle's dim corridors. Her dreams still weigh on her, though she masks it with careful composure, the way a performer ties a ribbon over a crack in the stage. She moves with purpose, yet her eyes drift often to the windows, where drops blur the world beyond. She seeks the beast, and you trail behind. He waits in the great hall, as if summoned by her thoughts alone. His frame looks larger than ever beneath the vaulted ceiling, but his shoulders are hunched, heavy with something unsaid. He greets her in that gravelly voice, half roar, half sigh. "Beauty," he says, "you may go to your family if you promise to return." The words hang thick in the air, weighted with rain. You feel Beauty's heart jolt. She has not voiced her longing aloud, but here it is offered like an escape and a tether in one breath. Mainstream historical fact. In 18th and 19th century Europe, arranged marriages often allowed women to return home for visits, but these were fraught with tension. Would they come back willingly? Historians still argue whether such allowances symbolized generosity or control disguised as kindness. Beauty clasps her hands together, fighting the impulse to rush forward. She whispers, "I swear it, I will come back." Her voice trembles with sincerity. You sense she means it now, though you also sense the danger. Oaths made in stormy halls often meet the sharp edges of reality. The beast nods, relief flickering like candlelight across his monstrous features. He offers her a tokenon enchanted ring that will carry her home when she turns it. His clawed hand holds it delicately, as though it might shatter in his palm. Quirky tidbit: enchanted rings pop up in folklore from Persia to Scandinavia, sometimes guaranteeing invisibility, sometimes granting endless bread. Imagine the awkwardness if this ring, instead of transporting her, simply provided toast on demand. Not useless, but hardly the dramatic escape she hopes for. Beauty accepts, slipping the ring onto her finger. It is cold at first, then warms, as if pulsing faintly with its own heartbeat. She feels the tug immediately, a pull toward her family's hearth, the echo of her father's tired sighs and her sister's chatter. The beast watches her with something raw in his gaze, though he does not beg, only repeats, "Return to me. Without you, I may not live." The line trembles between plea and prophecy. Historians still argue whether the beast archetype reflects male vulnerability, female responsibility, or simply the drama of Gothic storytelling. She promises again, firmer this time, though her voice catches on the edges of guilt. To leave is to taste freedom. To return is to bind herself anew. You feel the paradox twine around her, like ivy comforting, constricting, impossible to untangle. The rain outside intensifies, as if underscoring the gravity of her choice. Thunder rumbles faintly in the distance. Beauty turns the ring, and in a blink, the hall dissolves. Stone arches melt into shadows. The scent of damp roses vanishes, replaced by wood smoke and bread baking in a modest hearth. You stand with her in her father's cottage, so familiar it almost aches. Her sisters stare, mouths agape, while her father rises with tears already brimming. He clutches her, as though afraid she will vanish again. Quirky scene. One sister gasps, "Did you fly here?" Another pokes the ring suspiciously, as though it might bite. Beauty laughs, awkward and joyous, explaining nothing, because what explanation could satisfy? "A beast lent me this," she could say, "and a curse holds him prisoner." But that would sound absurd, even for family. Days pass quickly, filled with chatter and warmth. You follow Beauty as she lingers by the fire, helps mend clothes, and listens to her sister's gossip about suitors and market stalls. It is comforting, like slipping into old shoes. Yet she notices the pinch where once she didn't. Historians still argue whether nostalgia is a healing salve or a trap, a golden memory that distracts from the present. For Beauty, it is both. She soaks in every smile, every small task, yet the castle lurks in her mind, with its glowing gardens and the quiet shadow that waits for her return. At night, she dreams again, but now the roses wilt faster, and the beast's shadow lies collapsed across the castle floor. She wakes, sweating, guilt curling in her stomach like smoke. She whispers to herself, "I promised." But promises are harder to keep when home holds you tight, and love feels distant, monstrous, uncertain. The rain outside her childhood window patters softly. Different house, same sky. She wonders if the beast hears it too. The cottage air grows heavy, as though time itself is thickening. Beauty has been home for a week, then another. The days blur in their sweetness, warm bread, her father's laughter, her sister's schemes. Yet each night the dreams grow darker. In them the beast does not walk the gardens, but lies slumped across the marble steps, breath shallow, roses withering at his side. She wakes with a chill, heart pounding, whispering, "I swore I'd return." Still, she lingers. Quirky historical fact. in some early French tellings of the tale. Beauty delays her return simply because she enjoys dressing up and attending balls with her sisters. Fashion, yes, fashion was enough to nearly doom the beast. Historians still argue whether this reflects frivolity or the way society measures women by appearances above all else. Her sisters, of course, notice her restlessness. One teases, "You sigh like a girl in love." The other frowns, "But who waits for you in that castle?" They press her, but Beauty does not answer. To speak the truth would sound ridiculous. Instead, she busies herself with small chores, brushing her father's hair, sewing a torn sleeve. All the while the ring feels heavy, a small circle with the weight of an entire fate. The rain outside changes, tone lighter, playful, tapping against the window like a reminder. Yet Beauty feels it as accusation. Go back, you swore." And then, one morning, she dreams not of roses, but of the beast himself, gasping for breath, calling her name. His voice echoes hollow, fading at the edges. She wakes in terror. The hearth seems too bright, the laughter too sharp. Suddenly, home feels like a disguise, paper thin. She goes to her father. "I must return," she tells him, voice trembling. He clutches her hands, reluctant but resigned. "If that is your duty, child, then go." His eyes glisten, for he knows promises carry more weight than comfort. Quirky tidbit. Folklorists note how many fairy tales hinge on keeping or breaking a vow. In fact, there's a whole subgenre called the broken promise tale. Sometimes breaking the vow frees a curse. Sometimes it destroys everything. Beauty doesn't know which story she's in. She slips the ring onto her finger once more. For a heartbeat, the cottage spins the crackling fire. Her sister's curious stares, her father's sorrowful smile lull blur. Then, darkness, rain, stone, the castle looms again. But it has changed. Shadows cling to the walls like cobwebs. The roses, once radiant, sag with blackened edges. The air tastes stale, lifeless. And there, in the garden where she first walked with him, lies the beast. He is sprawled across the wet grass, his chest rising faintly, breath rattling. His fur is matted, his face pale beneath its monstrous lines. His eyes open weakly at her touch. "You came back," he whispers. The rain drips across his features, mingling with what might be tears. Beauty kneels beside him, clutching his paw's hand. "I promised," she cries, her voice breaking. "I promised I'd return." Historians still argue whether this moment is meant to symbolize love, loyalty, or simply obligation fulfilled. But here, in the storm-soaked garden, none of that matters. She feels his life slipping like water through her fingers, and for the first time, she realizes she cannot bear to lose him. Quirky comparison. Some medieval texts describe lovers pledging not by rings, but by bread breaking, a loaf together as a vow. Beauty wonders, if only briefly, if her promise would have been stronger sealed in bread instead of rain-soaked words. But it doesn't matter. What matters is this. She loves him. She leans close, her hair brushing his face, her tears mingling with the rain. "Do not die," she begs. "You have my heart. I did not know it until now, but it has always been yours." The beast exhales, a shuddering breath, eyes fluttering shut. The rain pauses, as if the world itself holds its breath. The air around you stills. For a moment, every drop of rain seems suspended, like the entire world is caught mid-breath, waiting. You cradle the beast's heavy head in your lap, his fur damp beneath your trembling hands, his breathing shallow. "Please," you whisper, your voice cracking. Don't leave me. I love you. And with that confession, the storm breaks, but not in the way you expect. Instead of thunder, there is light. A glow rises from his body, faint at first, then dazzling. His monstrous form begins to shift beneath your touch. His claws retract, curling into fingers. His fur melts away, leaving bare skin, warm beneath your palm. His face stretches, bones reforming, jaw narrowing, eyes brightening. For a moment, you think the earth itself might crack apart beneath you. But it is only him transforming, unraveling centuries of curse. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, transformations were a common metaphor in literature, often tied to Christian ideas of resurrection or rebirth. Poets loved turning beasts into men as symbols of salvation. Historians still argue whether Beauty and the Beast inherited this directly from religious allegory or from older pagan myths about animal brides and grooms. The light finally fades. Where the beast once lay, a man now rests. His features are noble, almost too handsome, with eyes that gleam the same deep kindness you had come to know. He looks fragile in his newness, as though a breath might dissolve him back into fur and claws. You draw back in shock, searching his face. Beast, you ask, voice trembling. He smiles faintly, voice softer now, but still familiar. No, not beast. Prince. It takes a heartbeat for the truth to sink in. All this time, you had loved not the monster, but the man hidden within. And yet it doesn't feel like a trick. The kindness, the gentleness, the vulnerability were always there. You see them in his new eyes, just as you saw them in his old ones. Quirky tidbit. Early versions of the story didn't always include a handsome prince reveal. Sometimes, Beauty loved the beast exactly as he was, full stop. The transformation was added later, possibly because 18th century audiences still wanted their fairy tales to end with royal marriages and pretty faces. Historians still argue whether that made the story weaker or more marketable. The prince rises unsteadily, his body adjusting to its new shape. You steady him, your hands against his chest, still half afraid he'll vanish. He laughs quietly, a sound you've never heard before but recognize instantly. The curse is broken, he tells you. Your love freed me. You both stand in the garden, surrounded by roses that suddenly bloom, brighter, redder, as though fed by the magic that now pulses through the castle. The rain, too, softens what was once heavy and oppressive, becomes a gentle drizzle, cleansing rather than drowning. And then you notice the castle itself is changing. The blackened walls glow with pale gold light, stones knitting back together where cracks had spread. The windows gleam clean, torches spark to life along the halls, fountains gurgle with fresh water. Even the statues seem to stretch their limbs, relieved after centuries of stillness. It's as though the entire place had been waiting for this single moment for your words, your love, your promise kept. Historical aside, in Versailles, when Louis XIV redecorated his palace, he filled it with mythological imagery about transformations, Apollo rising, Hercules reborn because he wanted visitors to see him as the center of rebirth and light. Fairy tales of the same period often mirrored these grand symbols of renewal. The prince takes your hand, his grip warm, steady. Beauty, he says, his voice carrying more strength now. Will you stay with me not out of duty, not out of pity, but out of love? And in that instant, the answer feels as natural as breath. You nod, smiling through tears. He presses your hand to his lips, eyes gleaming with gratitude. Around you, the rain gives way to moonlight, silver spilling across the newly restored gardens. Somewhere in the castle, distant bells begin to ring as though celebrating. Quirky detail. In some villages of old France, it was believed that if you rang bells during storms, you could chase away demons hiding in the rain. Tonight, it feels as though the demons are gone, banished not by bells, but by your simple vow. You and the prince walk together into the castle, no longer hollow, but alive. Tapestries unfurl across the walls, the air warms, and a faint music rises as if the stones themselves are singing. The corridors glow now, their shadows dissolved into light. You walk slowly beside the prince, your footsteps echoing not with dread, but with a strange new melody, as if the castle itself is humming approval. The air smells of wax and roses, fresh bread and candle smoke, a scent of life, rushing back into walls that had long been starved of it. As you pass, doors open of their own accord, curtains unfurl, chandeliers drip with warm gold light, scattering reflections across polished floors. The beast's lair, once haunted with silence, feels transformed into a place of welcome, a palace reborn. And then the most remarkable thing happens. Those mute, frozen figures you had always passed without thought, the statues, the candelabras, the oddly lifelike busts begin to move. One by one, they stir and stretch, shedding their stillness like a second skin. You realize with a rush that they were not mere decorations, but people, servants caught in the beast's curse. Historical fact. In Versailles, during the 17th century, Louis XIV famously demanded that servants stand completely still in the presence of nobility, creating a bizarre illusion that they were living statues. Historians still argue whether Beauty and the Beast picked up some of this imagery from tales passed down about court life. The first figure to step forward is a woman with silver hair who bows deeply to the prince. "Your Highness," she says, her voice breaking with joy. At last, he takes her hand, smiling with genuine affection. "Forgive me," he replies, his voice low but steady, "for keeping you in silence so long." Soon, dozens of figures gather around. The candelabra man flickers his flames in celebration. A clock-faced steward sighs in relief, his hands finally freed of their endless ticking. They circle you both, not as servants, but as family, reunited after endless waiting. Quirky tidbit. In certain German folktales, household objects weren't cursed at all. They were believed to carry protective spirits, kobolds, or house brownies who helped with chores. Historians still argue whether the enchanted objects in Beauty and the Beast were meant as sympathetic allies or simply eerie symbols of the curse. The prince addresses them all, his voice carrying through the hall. "We are free," he says simply. Thanks to her, and dozens of eyes turn to you, soft with gratitude. For a moment, the weight of that recognition presses against you, ordinary you, who had simply spoken the truth of your heart. The celebration begins, not with grand fanfare, but with laughter. Someone opens a bottle of wine that had been trapped in dust for centuries. Someone else sets a table with platters of fruit and steaming bread. Musicians who had been frozen mid-bow pick up their instruments and strike a tune that feels both ancient and brand new. It is strange, standing here, knowing the world beyond these gates still imagines this castle as ruined, haunted, abandoned. Inside, though, it is alive with music and warmth. and you, unexpectedly, are at the center of it. The prince leans close, whispering so only you can hear. Do you see what you've given back to us? Not just me, but all of them. A flush warms your cheeks. You don't know what to say, so you squeeze his hand in reply. Historical aside, in medieval banquets, guests were expected to bring laughter and stories as much as food. Silence was considered almost dangerous, a sign of spirits lurking. Tonight, in this hall, silence is shattered, replaced by story and song, as if centuries of stillness are being undone all at once. You let yourself relax into the rhythm. Someone drapes a cloak across your shoulders to keep you warm. Someone else hands you a goblet, cool against your palm. Around you, people talk and dance, their joy tumbling into the air like sparks. And yet, even here, you find a thread of quiet. You step onto the balcony, the rain now little more than a mist, moonlight glistening on every droplet that clings to the rose bushes. The prince follows, wrapping an arm around your shoulders. The castle glows behind you. The garden stretches out ahead, shimmering under the night sky. He looks at you with a smile that still holds a trace of disbelief, as if he cannot quite accept that this miracle is real. I thought I would spend eternity alone, he admits softly. But you stayed. You lean into him, the warmth of his body grounding you. Of course I stayed, you whisper back. You were never truly a beast. Quirky aside, in early printed editions of the tale, some readers complained the ending felt too sudden, the beast turning into a prince and everyone instantly celebrating. Scholars have long debated whether the story works better with a longer pause, where beauty adjusts to her new reality. Tonight, standing here, you understand the wisdom of that pause. Change takes time to settle in. The night stretches long, full of celebration, but also reflection. Somewhere deep inside you, sleepiness finally begins to stir, their safe kind. The kind that comes when you know you are no longer hunted by fear, but held by belonging. You stand on the balcony until your eyelids grow heavy, the prince's hand steady in yours, the world outside hushed and silvered by rain. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you know what it is to be home. Dawn comes quietly, slipping into the castle like a secret no one dares disturb. The rain has finally ceased, leaving the garden washed and gleaming, every rose sparkling with drops of silver. You rise slowly, stretching against the cool linens, the faint scent of beeswax and roses still lingering in the air. Beside you, the prince stirs, no longer monstrous, no longer cursed, just a man, steady-breathed, with a softness in his face that had been hidden for so long. You pad barefoot through the corridor, the stone floor cool under your skin. The castle feels different in daylight, not simply because of the sunlight pouring through tall windows, but because of the voices, real voices. Servants bustle lightly, carrying trays, opening shutters, laughing as though the walls themselves are ticklish with relief. You hear someone humming a tune that might once have been a lullaby, and you realize that silence no longer rules here. A tray is offered to you, fresh bread, honey, a pot of steaming tea. You take it, feeling the warmth seep into your palms. The prince joins you soon after, his hair still mussed, his smile unguarded. He takes a sip of tea, then laughs at how simple it all seems. Eating breakfast in the hall of a castle that had known centuries of despair. Historical fact, tea itself was a relatively new luxury in Europe when Beauty and the Beast was first being told. By the 18th century, it had become both fashionable and controversial, with critics calling it wasteful or corrupting. Historians still argue whether Beauty's story originally featured tea as a symbol of civility, or whether later retellings added it as a touch of refinement. The prince spreads honey onto a slice of bread, then pauses, as if the act itself carries meaning. "Do you know," he says softly, "for years I couldn't taste anything. It was all ash, all bitterness. But now," he takes a bite and closes his eyes, savoring. "Now it is sweet." Quirky tidbit. In certain French villages, it was once believed that honey gathered after rain carried magical properties, as if the storm cleansed the nectar and left only purity behind. Perhaps this breakfast carries more than flavor. Perhaps it carries blessing. After the meal, you walk together through the gardens, where servants are already trimming roses, clearing broken branches, and gathering rainwater into stone basins. Everywhere you look, life returns. Even the birds seem emboldened, swooping low and singing as if they, too, were freed from some long curse. The prince shows you a fountain hidden behind ivy, its waters trickling with a sound like laughter. He admits he had forgotten it even existed. "I walked past it 100 times, he confesses, "but I never saw it until now." And you realize this is the nature of healing, not grand gestures alone, but small rediscoveries, a fountain, a flower, a taste of bread. You pause near the rose bush that began everything. The petals glisten with dew, 1,000 mirrors of the dawn. You touch one gently, feeling its velvet coolness. For a moment, memory washes over you. Stormy nights, empty halls, that first terror when you thought you were trapped forever. And now, standing in the same place, you can hardly believe how much has changed. Historical aside, roses have been symbols of love and transformation for centuries. In medieval allegories, they represented both divine mystery and earthly passion. Historians still argue whether the enchanted rose in Beauty and the Beast was meant to signify doomed time, pure love, or simply the fragility of life itself. The prince notices your gaze and slips his hand into yours. "No more counting petals," he says quietly. "No more waiting for time to run out." You nod, holding that thought like a secret vow. Later, the castle gathers in the grand hall, not for another feast, but for a quiet moment of acknowledgement. The servants kneel not out of duty, but out of gratitude. The prince lifts his hand, insisting gently, "No more kneeling, stand with me." And so they do, a community instead of a hierarchy, their laughter breaking into the morning light. There is music, again, softer this time. Someone plucks a harp, the notes drifting like fresh air through open windows. The melody feels both ancient and fragile, like something carried in from another age. And yet, despite the joy, a strange calm settles over you. The story is not about grand endings, you realize. It is about the hush that follows, the way rain gives way to stillness, the way fear gives way to breath. The prince notices your faraway look and teases lightly. "What are you thinking about now? That I still snore like a beast?" You laugh, shaking your head. "No, I was thinking how strange it is that happiness can feel so quiet." He grins, then grows thoughtful. "Quiet is what I always feared. But with you, it feels alive." Quirky observation. Some folklorists note that in older tales, Beauty often asks for more time before marriage, choosing to live at the castle first as a companion. Historians still argue whether this detail reflected anxieties about arranged marriages, or whether it symbolized a deeper truth that love grows best in patience, not haste. So the two of you walk again, not rushing, not proclaiming anything too loudly. The castle hums with its new life, but you let the moments unfold one by one, like rain droplets sliding from a rose petal. The story, you realize, does not end with fireworks or trumpets. It ends with bread and tea, with laughter returning, with roses glistening in dawn light. And as the day warms, you find yourself ready not just for this morning, but for every morning to come. Evening drifts back over the castle, soft and almost shy, as though it knows how heavy the nights used to be here. The rain begins again, not in the roaring storms that once accompanied sorrow, but in a delicate patera curtain of silver threads that hushes the world outside. You walk the halls slowly, your hand brushing the tapestries that no longer feel like walls closing in, but like memories hanging quietly where they belong. Candles flicker in tall holders, their light gentler now, no longer straining against darkness, but joining with it. The prince no longer beast, though the name clings to memory like ivy sits by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. He looks smaller without the curse, less dramatic perhaps, but more human in a way that makes your chest ache. He catches your eye and smiles, a smile that says, "We survived the storm. Now let us rest in the drizzle." The servants prepare a quiet supper, nothing extravagant, just soup, warm bread, and a little wine. There are no cheers tonight, no feasts that try to prove joy exists. Tonight is about softness. You eat together, each spoonful echoing the comfort of simplicity. Historical fact: in many old European households, supper was intentionally lighter than midday meals, designed to ease digestion and encourage calm before sleep. Historians still argue whether this routine was truly about health, or whether it was just a way to save fuel and candles at night. Either way, the Victorians weren't wrong. There's a particular peace in ending your day with something warm, something easy. The prince leans back, wiping his lips with a cloth, then sighs deeply, as though even breathing feels new. "Do you hear it?" he asks. You tilt your head, listening. Not just the rain, but the faint croak of frogs in the garden pond, the occasional drip of water slipping through an old gutter, the rustle of leaves still wet. He nods. That's the sound of a place healing, quirky tidbit in folklore. Rain was often thought to carry blessings, cleansing the land of old curses. Some traditions even warned against shutting windows during a gentle rain, lest you trap the healing air outside. And so, here in the castle, the shutters stay open just enough to let the rhythm of droplets become part of the night. You and the prince walk into the garden once more, lantern in hand, though the rain is too light to stop you. The roses bow under their jeweled burden, but they do not break. Their fragrance is stronger now, sharpened by the rain. You pause to breathe it in, the sweetness cutting through the damp air, grounding you in this moment. He whispers, almost to himself, "Once I thought I'd be forgotten here, swallowed by ivy and silence. But you," his voice catches, and he shakes his head with a small laugh. "You saw me, even when I hid from myself, and you smile, because you remember every step, the terror of your first nights here, the strange calm of candlelit conversations, the way silence stretched but never snapped. You remember, and you realize that stories do not erase pain. They weave it into something that can be carried more gently." Historians still argue whether Beauty and the Beast was ever truly about romance, or whether it was about survival, the survival of women in arranged marriages, the survival of men weighed down by their own tempers and failures, the survival of households through storms of change. But lying here in the garden, with rain kissing your skin and roses gleaming in the dark, the story feels less like survival and more like surrender. The night grows thicker, and the castle begins to quiet again. Servants retire, candles are snuffed, and the halls return to shadows. You and the prince retreat to your chamber, the rain a steady lullaby against the windows. The bed is wide, the sheets cool, the air filled with the hum of night. You lie back, the rain tracing your thoughts into slower patterns. The prince settles beside you, reaching for your hand, not with desperation this time, but with a steady calm. There are no more curses to fear, no more petals to count, no more bargains left unsettled. Only this, the sound of rain, the warmth of breath, the stillness of a story that has finally found its rest. And as your eyes close, you realize that the beast was never just a figure in a fairy tale. The beast was the storm inside each of us, the fear of not being loved, the weight of silence, the dread of endless nights. And beauty, the beauty in this story is the part of us that stays, that listens, that waits for rain to soften the world. You drift on that thought, the rain pulling you under, gentle as silk. Now, let the pace ease even further. Imagine the rain stretching out endlessly, not in sheets, not in storms, but in the quiet rhythm of drops against leaves, against stone, against glass. Each sound is a step further away from your worries, a step closer to the place where thought dissolves into dream. The castle is at peace now, and so are you. No curses left to lift, no bargains left to keep, no walls pressing in. Only the softness of night, the slow breathing of a place finally safe, and the warmth of stillness all around. Let yourself picture the roses again, their petals close against the dark, heavy with dew, waiting for morning, but not rushing toward it. You too can wait. There's no need to move, no need to solve, no need to hold yourself upright. You can simply be here, resting, like the garden, like the stones, like the beast-turned man who now dreams without fear. The rain continues, unbothered by time. It falls whether you count the hours or not. It falls whether you're awake or asleep. And soon it will carry you, slipping you into dreams as softly as it slips into the earth. So, let go. Let the rhythm of rain be enough. Let the story curl closed, like a book set gently on the bedside. You've heard enough. You've wandered enough. Now, sleep is waiting. And with that, good night, sweet dreams.